will fight till the end. Doesn't matter what the world brings against me. I will fight till the end. Doesn't matter what people say.
Thanks for joining us today on WNTW 820 AM The Answer. And this is Cut to the Chase radio show with Senator Chase, and I am Senator Chase, and it is such an honor to serve you all. I serve the 11th Senatorial District, which includes Chesterfield, Amelia, and Colonial Heights. Most of Chesterfield, anyway. It's been my home since 1979. I really look forward to this show every week. I love being out and talking to constituents throughout the week, and I mentioned this before, that we do have office hours on Tuesdays and Thursdays. My office is downtown, and if you're willing to brave the parking, I love to meet with you. And we're gearing up for session right now. As you know, it starts the second week in January, and this will be our short session, so it'll be 45 days as opposed to 60 days, and it's pretty intense. As you know, we're a citizen legislature. We don't meet year-round as they do in D.C., but that doesn't mean that I'm not busy out there working for you. Like I said, outside of session, I've got office hours, so happy to meet with you. This is a call-in radio show. It's a weekly town hall, so I encourage you to call in. I'm going to give you the number right now, so get your pen ready. It's 804-454-1366. And, it's just a great opportunity. I don't ever want anyone in the district to say, hey, I can't reach you, I can't get in contact with you. And one of my two biggest goals when I became your state senator was to be approachable and to be accessible. And so I hope you'll take advantage of calling in today. It's going to be a great show. We're going to be talking about education, which is near and dear to my heart. As you know, I have 4 kids. I've got 1 in college, 2 in high school, 1 graduating this year, and another 1 in middle school. And so I'm really in the thick of education with my kids. I live it. I get it. I understand what you all are going through with our school system. And, we've had quite a few developments this week on a number of educational fronts, and we are going to have Gerard Robinson, who used to be the former Secretary of Education for the Commonwealth of Virginia. He also currently works for the American Enterprise Institute. He's just a great resource, and we're going to talk to him in just a little bit. Let me tell you a little bit about Gerard. He's a resident fellow at the American Enterprise Institute, where he works on education policy issues, including choice in public and private schools, regulatory development, and implementation of K-12 laws. The role of for-profit institutions in education, prison education and reentry, rural education, and the role of community colleges and historically black colleges and universities and adult advancement. Before joining AEI, Robinson served as Commissioner of Education for the state of Florida and Secretary of Education, as I mentioned earlier, for Virginia under Governor Bob McDonnell. As President of the Black Alliance for Education Options, Robinson worked to ensure that children in low-income and working-class black families in several states and the District of Columbia were given the opportunity to attend good schools. Throughout his career, he has evaluated the effects of reform initiatives on parental choice and student achievement, advocated for laws to improve delivery of teaching and learning, and published essays on how to make a good policy to give all children a chance at a good job and a great future. He has a master's from Harvard University, bachelor's from Howard University. And Dr. Robinson, are you there? Is Dr. Robinson on the phone?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Thanks so much for coming on the show today.
Hello, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me? Okay. Can you hear me, Gerard?
Yes, thanks for having me on your show.
Fantastic. Well, we really appreciate you joining us today. You've really dedicated your life to the education of children. As a mom of 4 kids, I so appreciate all your work. What an incredible resume, including the Secretary of Education in the Commonwealth of Virginia. Tell me a little bit about why you do what you do.
So I'm the first in my family to graduate from college. My parents both instilled in me the importance of education and what it could do to open up doors of opportunity. And so I was blessed to have a number of good mentors, including family, who made sure that I stayed on the path And once I finished Howard University nearly 25 years ago, I decided that I would dedicate the rest of my life to education, because there's really no line item in the state budget or entity that can fundamentally change society in education. So for me, it's not a career, it's a calling. And I wake up every morning trying to think about how to keep Virginia and the nation stronger and smarter every day.
Amen to that. And, you know, education choice has been a big part of what you've worked on for over the years. Can you explain what that means to our listeners and why you work so diligently to improve choices for our students?
Well, school choice for me is something that's larger than just charters or vouchers or education savings accounts. It's fundamental to who we are as a free people. When you think about the fact that before we had public schools created mostly throughout the South after the Civil War, or even the concept of a state school in the New England area, parents were children's first educator. They educated children at home. Parents began to create co-ops and began to educate children in different ways. So school choice for me is really about parental choice, choosing a school system or a venue that works best for your child. Now, you know, we're blessed to be in the Commonwealth where we have some of the best public schools in the nation, and many of them are educating students really well. But we also have pockets of challenge. And so for me, when I say parental choice, it's not anti-public school as much as pro, giving parents the option, particularly to use their tax dollars in ways that makes sense.
That's exactly right. And I know one of the things that I try to emphasize is, you know, we need to do what's best for our kids. We need to take the politics out of the kids. Not every child does well in one particular situation. It's, you know, we can't have a one-size-fits-all education. And personally, you know, we've homeschooled. We've had our kids in a private school. Our kids have been in public school for about 5-6 years. I've had one and then another one this year that will graduate from public school. So sometimes there are seasons that a child may need a particular environment, and then they mature and they're ready for another environment. But just for parents to have that flexibility to do what's best for their kids and giving them options is so important. What would you say is the most important change that you would recommend to help improve education in Virginia? Are you still there? Gerard, are you there? Can you hear me? So we're talking about change. That I'm not sure what happened to the call. They were going to try to get Gerard back in just a minute. Okay, there you are. Gerard, can you hear me now? I thought I heard him for a second.
Yes.
Okay, great. I don't know if you heard the question, but I said, what do you think is the most important change that you would recommend to help improve education in Virginia?
Number one thing is to have parents focus on literacy for their children. When students drop out of the 10th grade, where 70% of our students do nationally, and a similar number within the Commonwealth, it's not as if they became illiterate overnight.
Right.
Challenges with literacy start as early as elementary school, and we know that for families that have access to books and other technology, that there can be a 30,000 word gap between children in homes where parents promote literacy through reading versus those who do not. So for me, independent of income, support literacy, which is not only reading to children, but the importance of comprehension and reading widely. That would make a big difference.
I couldn't agree with you more. Especially whenever you look at some of the early programs. Tell us, whenever you are in the McDonnell administration, tell me a little bit about some of the initiatives that you push forward to kind of help in that area.
So Governor McDonnell was pretty clear in the campaign and once in office that an opportunity to learn was his agenda. And so we signed into law a virtual education bill that became law, which basically allowed students to have access to a curriculum and to teachers outside the traditional setting they would have, particularly in places in rural areas where that makes a lot of sense. So that was a move in the right direction. You take a look at the college laboratory bill that we also signed into law in 2010. The University of Virginia School of Education, its engineering department, in conjunction with its local community college, Piedmont, Virginia, and the Charlottesville school system actually created a partnership where they're teaching STEM to middle school students at Buford Middle Elementary School, or middle school, I should say. Why that's important is it's a Title I school. For a number of years, parents would send their children to Charlottesville Public Schools up until grade 5, and they would move out. Well, now you find parents, both Title I and middle-class and working-class families, choosing to go to Buford because guess what? They're going to have access to not only great teachers, but access to resources from the University of Virginia and Piedmont Community College. That's something we're going to see move throughout the state. We also supported entrepreneurship, which is also a part of literacy. We were one of the first states to create a partnership with Microsoft.
Gerard, I'm sorry to interrupt you. We've got a part for a break, but stay tuned. Stay right
no
there.
Problem.
When we come back, we want you to talk about President-elect Trump and his pick for U.S. Secretary of Education. So stay tuned. We'll be right back. You are listening to WNTW AM 820, The Answer with Senator Chase, and I have Gerard Robinson, who's former Secretary of Education in the Commonwealth of Virginia, on the line today. And we want to first of all just thank so much, Gerard, for being willing to be on the phone today. And my question before the break: President-elect Trump has chosen Betsy DeVos for the U.S. Secretary of Education. What do you anticipate coming from the Trump administration in the area of education?
He was pretty confident and clear that school choice was going to be a major part of his administration and his agenda. Now, that includes making traditional public schools work well. He also talked about charter schools and vouchers, but he didn't do it for the sole purpose of saying it's us versus them, as much as saying I want all kids to have a great education so they can partake in the American dream. And by picking someone like Betsy DeVos, which was a wise choice, he's got someone with a commitment to not only helping all kids, but also understanding the role of business management and philanthropy and how that can make sense in this area.
Now, I understand that Betsy DeVos is a prominent charter school advocate, as you mentioned. She's the first woman selected for a top-level post in the new administration. There was some concern, I think, from some conservatives. They warned that DeVos was a longtime Republican donor, that she previously supported the Common Core education standards that I know Trump rallied against during the campaign. But Trump called her a brilliant and passionate education advocate. Under her leadership, we will reform the U.S. education system and break the bureaucracy that's holding our children back so that we can deliver world-class education and school choice to all families. What are your thoughts on the Common Core education system, and is that something that is going to be something that they implement or something that they pull back? Do you think she'll concede and kind of go with Trump's message?
When that question was raised to her, she says, I'm against Common Core, period. I've got a number of conservative friends as well who said, well, I think at one point she did, and some say she didn't. We'll have a hearing, and she'll have an opportunity to explain exactly where she is. From the Trump administration standpoint, he was clear that he wants to get us out of Common Core for all the reasons that he said. When he mentioned that education was important, he picked someone who actually believes that. But here's something that we as a Commonwealth just take a moment to pat ourselves on the back. In 2010, when other states were going for race to the top in Common Core, Governor McDonnell and I had a conversation, and I also had one with Democrats. It's one of the few areas where Democrats and Republicans agreed that we did not want to move forward with Common Core because we did not want to upset a decade plus worth of work that we've done for our own standards. While not perfect, we would know they're better than what we would have gotten. And so while other states are struggling with should we keep it, should we go back, Virginia stayed the course. And people laughed in 2010, but we're smelling like a rose in 2016. And I think that same type of philosophy Betsy DeVos will support in terms of saying, let's not focus on Common Core as much as making education a common sense approach to helping families and children.
And amen to that. One more issue I wanted to bring up with you. I'm not sure. Well, I know this came before the General Assembly this past session about the book controversy regarding parental rights and educating and informing parents about sensitive and controversial material and giving the parent the opportunity to have their child opt out. It was a bill that was sponsored by Delegate Landis in the House, one that passed the House and the Senate but was vetoed by the governor. And I received word this week that the Virginia Department of Education is considering a regulation that would change how all schools across the state of Virginia handle sexually explicit material. Have you heard anything about this?
Yes, I have. I know that one of the Virginians who helped to sponsor this recently received an award as Virginian of the Year. But here's what's important. Someone mentioned to me that the same language that we want our kids to read, if we're put into a Word document and sent to lawmakers, you actually couldn't get it because the system would block it because there was a material in there. If it's going to be blocked for state lawmakers, I'm not shocked, I guess, to some extent. But I think it at least makes sense to give parents an opportunity to decide what is appropriate and not appropriate. I don't look at it so much as censorship or book burning as much as letting parents decide when it's appropriate for a child to walk into certain subjects.
And
but I think it's a step in a healthy direction.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And one of the points that I had made was that, in Chesterfield specifically, there is a promoted there's a core values that we promote of honesty and responsibility, these types of things. And these books, many of them, are controversial and violate the very principles that we try to espouse. And we're talking about a selection process. We're not talking about banning, as you mentioned. We're not talking about these books are not going to be available. We're talking about what are we going to be promoting, because every kid, we all come from different backgrounds, and we're the melting pot, if you will, in our schools, and we have people with different values, different systems, different desires, and so we're having to make sure that at the end of the day, that the parents are the legal guardians of their kids. And so the State Board of Education heard about the amendment to its regulations governing local school boards and school divisions during its business meeting last week. If approved, and I understand it's going to come up for a vote in January, the proposal would require every school to provide a notice to parents and legal guardians at the start of each school year, identifying any sexually explicit materials that would be used in the classroom. The regulation already includes requirements for each school division to have policies and procedures addressing those sensitive and controversial activities, but the amendment adds language about sexually explicit material and would actually require teachers to provide alternative materials and assignments for students upon request. And one of the things that parents have told me when I've been out is I had no idea that this book, because you can't really tell based on the title for many of them whether there's sexual content in there or not that they would object to. So it's letting the parent know at the beginning of the school year, these are the books that are on the list for the kids to read, and it just gives the parents an opportunity to know what their kids are going to be reading. I think it's a great idea. Well, Gerard,
no,
go ahead.
No, I think it makes sense. One last point. It's amazing that we have to go through a regulatory battle to inform parents of what's appropriate or not. But every morning when a kid puts toothpaste on his or her toothbrush and you turn it over, it tells you not to swallow. Imagine
That's
that.
Right. Well, that's exactly right. And, my whole thing is, if the kids came to school with a T-shirt that had on it printed any of this material that's in these books, they would be suspended from school. If they spoke it in class to a fellow schoolmate, they would be sent home. I mean, it's just so hypocritical and just so intolerable. And I congratulate the Virginia Department of Education for, in my opinion, equipping parents to be involved in their kids' education, and I just think that's critical at this point. Once again, not banning, we're not burning, we're not doing any of that. Some parents, if they want to let their kids read that, go for it, but we should not penalize or hurt parents of kids who don't want to have that exposure to their kids. So, Gerard, thanks so much for being on the show today. We really appreciate your time today. Stay tuned.
Great.
We'll be right back with Craig DeSessa of Middle Resolution. Stay tuned.
will fight till the end. Doesn't matter what the world brings against me. I will fight till the end.
This is State Senator Amanda Chase on Cut to the Chase Radio. And next up, we have Craig DeSessa, who is with Middle Resolution. And Middle Resolution is a organization that's focused on advancing freedom and opportunity for all citizens of Virginia by working in both the legislative and the election cycle. They use the intelligence gathered in these operations to effectively hold politicians accountable, and I'm all for that. Craig directs the legislative initiatives where he works to promote public policy that encourages the expansion of free market economics in several policy areas, and one of those is education. Much of the Middle Resolution's success has resulted from Craig's ability to develop and lead powerful coalitions that drive good public policy. Craig, thanks so much for being on the show today.
Hi, Senator Chase. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. We're so glad you joined us today. And I understand you and I have known each other for quite a while, and I just appreciate so much your efforts in understanding the education opportunities out there, specifically for inner city students, which I know is a focus of yours. And what prompted your focus in this area?
Well, it's interesting. Before I got involved in public policy, I was a stay-at-home parent. I was the parent at home, making sure the kids were going off to school and doing all the things they need to do. And my wife and I raised 3 children. And we used every available education opportunity that we had. We used public schools primarily, but I also used private schools and also homeschooled one of my children. And we were very blessed to have those choices. The other hat that I continue to wear, though, is I work closely with the inner city children. It didn't take long for me to realize that these children and their parents don't have the same educational opportunities that we had. Mm-hmm. And these children are typically in low-income families who struggle with enormous social challenges. And they literally spend their days in survival mode. And most of these challenges result from the loss of the conduct and values that allows for the development of healthy families, work ethic, and self-sufficiency. And so, over the years, as I've been working with these children and learned that they don't have these opportunities, and then I got involved with public policy, I saw that there was a great need to have an impact on that public policy to help reform not only the schools within the inner city, but also provide more options for parents within the education system.
You know, that, and when you're talking about that, you're talking about in the Richmond area. Is that where you raised your kids?
Yeah, that's where I spend all of my time when I'm working with inner city folks. We're involved in running camps for children, and we pull them out of we work with ministry partners within the city, and they are the ones who provide the children for the camps. We take them for a week, and we teach them that God loves them, they have value, and they have purpose in life. And through those interactions with those children, you really begin to understand the challenges that they face when they return to their communities.
Well, what are some of the initiatives that Middle Resolution is working on right now? I know that you and I had talked about educational savings accounts, and we had even passed a bill that would help specifically kids who are disabled. You want to talk a little bit about that to our listener and educate them on what an educational savings account is?
Yeah, definitely. So we are looking at, we've worked on a couple of different initiatives, but one of them is the one you just mentioned. Several years ago, we started to look into education freedom, and after meeting with policy experts and educators, we decided to focus on offering parents more options. And we introduced legislation that would allow parents to remove their children from the public school and receive 90% of the state portion of the money that follows a child. And that's, we don't touch the local money at all, and that's about 2/3 of the money that is used to educate a child in the public schools in Virginia, and that's an average. So 1/3 of it is provided by the state. So that money, 90% of that money, would be deposited into what's called an education savings account, very much like a health savings account. And the parent then can take that money to use for pre-approved education expenses such as private school, homeschool expenses, education therapies, whatever has been approved by the state. The parents can use that to educate their child. So what's interesting about it and fascinating is this really opens up options for parents.
Now,
they don't just have to.
Is this being used in another state successfully that you're aware of?
Yeah, sure. Arizona was the first state to pass this in 2011. and they started it off with kids with just with disabilities, and then they've expanded it to several other populations since then, and it's been working quite well there. Nevada recently passed a bill last year, and they introduced a universal bill where every kid was able to take advantage of this program. And they've had, unfortunately, we have tremendous challenges in the courts on these. Our opponents are basically your education bureaucracies, your associations such as unions and so forth.
Well, Craig, when we come back, we're going to go to a break here, but y'all stay tuned. Craig's going to come back, and we're going to talk a little bit more about these initiatives and what we can do to help our kids. Stay tuned. Thanks for joining us today on AM 820 WNTW. This is State Senator Amanda Chase taking your calls at 804-454-1366. If you'd like to call in and have an educational question or comment, we are so thankful to have Craig DeCessa of the Middle Resolution, and we're talking about the educational savings accounts for kids with disabilities. And, this received support in both the House and the Senate, correct?
That is correct. We got it through the House and the Senate, thanks to you and many of your colleagues, and then then it went to the governor's desk, and he vetoed the bill.
Did he say specifically why he vetoed the bill? Is there any particular justification?
He did, and to be honest, I don't recall what it was, but it was along the lines that it was going to take money from the schools and from the public schools and so forth. It was one of the typical lines that we hear. Misunderstandings about the bill.
So let's just take a look at our typical teacher. Right now the kids are integrated. You've got kids with disabilities, mainstreamed with kids that don't have disabilities or, need the additional help. And so sometimes the teachers are in a situation where, they're hardworking teachers. They want to do what's best for all of the kids in their class. But the reality is, and some of the teachers I've talked to, is they do have to spend a lot of time with maybe a couple of kids in the class, and in some cases, the other kids are left there waiting while the teacher deals with a particular situation. So, tell me about the testimony of some of the teachers that came forward during session and said that they supported this.
Well, there wasn't a lot of teachers that came forward, but there were teachers that have talked to us about the challenges they face in the classrooms. And you're absolutely right, Senator. The teachers are tremendously tasked and tested in the classroom with these children. And so what we're trying to do is provide parents and the children and the teachers some relief. Parents obviously know best, and they know how to educate their children, especially when it comes to a special needs child, because they live with the child. And so this opportunity would give the parents the chance to remove the child from the school, receive some of the funding, and then provide a different form of education for them. As far as the teacher goes, obviously, if you remove that child from the classroom, the teacher is freed up to spend more time with the children in the classroom. And obviously, that is an advantage for everybody in the classroom. So, going to your question about teachers, we talked to a few, but unfortunately, there's tremendous pressure coming from your education bureaucracies. I mentioned it earlier. The Virginia School Board Association, for example, and the Virginia Education Association, they are all about keeping their power and keeping their money. And if you remove a child from the school system, their perception is that they're going to lose money, and they don't want to do that. So there's pressure on the teachers not to speak out or speak in favor of something like this. But we do often get parents, as you may recall in your committee, we had Lisa Smith talk about her daughter who has special needs, and she believes this would provide a great benefit to not only her child but also to many children who will be given some other opportunities outside the school system, public school system.
Thank you, Craig. So how can folks get involved in this effort? What do they do? Is there a website that they can?
Yeah, I would suggest that they go to our website, middleresolution.org. The two words, middle resolution, but it's one word, and sign up for our emails because we're going to be messaging on this throughout General Assembly. In fact, we're going to start messaging on it here in a couple of weeks, and we will keep folks informed of what is going on at the General Assembly, when the bills will be coming up. It's just not the Education Savings Account legislation. It's also trying to expand the Education Improvement Scholarship Tax Credit, which we have that law today where parents can apply for scholarships from scholarship foundations where money is donated by individuals and corporations. But it's underutilized because it's a very weak law right now, and we want to expand it so more children have more opportunity to get some money to go to private school. There's also charter schools. We want to try to change the charter school law so more charter schools can be created. Virtual school board, which you know about, I'm sure, creating a virtual school board so parents, instead of having to go all over the state to find the different virtual classrooms, can go to one school board, and there's sort of a clearinghouse of, hey, this is what's available, and we can set you up with it.
Well, so, Craig, I really appreciate you taking time. We're going to go to a caller. We've got George from Dinwiddie calling about voter registration. So we're going to go to his call. But I thank you so much for tuning in and talking to us. We appreciate your efforts and work with the Middle Resolution. So y'all go to his website, middleresolution.com.
I got another question about your radio station.
Okay. This is George from Dinwiddie. Thanks for calling in.
Thank you. I went to the voter registration office before the election and was asking about my a lady friend that had deceased in 2014. She was still on the voter registration list, and the lady told me that as she purged the list, she looked at the desk on the newspapers, that desk notices in the newspaper. That's how she purged the list. Is that a good way to do it?
Well, there's that's a great question, and George, thanks so much. And stay tuned. I'm gonna answer your call. We're gonna go ahead and let George go there, but I'm gonna answer his question. So, the big question is, we've had a lot of issues with our people who are deceased still being on the list. So what we need to do is make sure that we're purging those lists, and it's up to individual registrars to take care of that and make sure that happens. And do they go through the newspaper? They don't do that. They actually get this information in another way through the State Board of Elections, but definitely there's some opportunity and some reform listed. I actually have an email from Clarabelle Wheeler, who is one of our election officers who handles that at the State Board of Elections. And there's a list of 15 suggestions, and so that one's in there. So it's one of the things that we're going to address during the upcoming session. So, George, thank you so much for your call. And I think it's very important. Definitely some opportunities out there with this election that were brought to our attention regarding some cleanup efforts. And, we have some work to do. So stay tuned. We're going to have a wrap up here. I'm going to talk to you about some upcoming legislation that I'm going to be proposing this coming session. So stay tuned. We'll be back in 3 minutes. It's the final wrap-up of Cut to the Chase with Senator Chase, and this is State Senator Amanda Chase at your service. And thanks so much for the call in today from George from Dinwiddie. And as I wrap up today, I just want to let you know Monday is my deadline, and I have to submit as much legislation as I'm gonna champion this coming session. I just want to give you a brief synopsis. Also encourage you to tune in to my website, chaseforsenate.com, because we'll have all my legislation there. You can follow the bills. We've got a lot of great resources for constituents to follow these bills through our 45-day session, which begins the second week in January. But I will be introducing a term limits bill, which limits a legislator to 12 years in office, just to kind of encourage state legislators should be citizen legislators, not career politicians. So it's along that venue. Second bill is a governor's residency requirement of 8 years. We want to make sure our governor is fully vested in Virginia. Firearms discretionary fee for concealed handgun permit. What is that? So basically what we're trying to do, I personally don't feel like that you should have to pay a fee to exercise your Second Amendment right. So this would give the clerk of the circuit court the ability to waive that fee. And it's a $10 fee. I think the cost right now in Chesterfield anyway is like $50 if you want to apply for a concealed handgun permit. So it would waive 10 of that. So that's one of the items that I'm pushing. In order to help small business, I'm looking at reforming the B-poll tax. This is a business tax that many of us have to pay who are small business owners. It is based on the amount of receipts that you bring in instead of your income. So let's just say you have large ticket items and your retail sales are high and you have large ticket items, but you're not making any money because your expenses are so high. You know, you're having to pay a tax on how much money you're bringing in as opposed to your profit. So I want to fix that. How do we bring big corporations here? I think that we need to reduce the corporate income tax down to 2.5%. So I'll be introducing Senate Bill 835 so that we're competitive with North Carolina, who will be at 3% next year. And I think in order to have a substantial incentive to have corporations to come here, we've got to reduce that. So I'm doing that. Also, an individual income tax, waiving the tax for the first 5 years for small businesses making less than $100,000 profit. So that's going to be filed before Monday. And then finally, you know, a lot of you, we've been talking about the Electoral College versus the popular vote. How do we make sure that Virginia is represented? There's a lot of frustration out there. Why do we always have to concede to what Northern Virginia wants to do because they have the most populated area? And so I'm looking at a split electoral vote, similar to what Maine has. So what that would mean is each congressional district would get a vote, and then you'd have 2 at-large popular vote opportunities. So anyway, stay tuned next Thursday. We've got another great show coming up from you 4 to 5 on AM 820 WNTW. Thanks for tuning in today. I'm Senator Chase, and I will see you next week.